Good morning. I'm Rob Grimes, and I am with the IFBTA, and I'm really pleased today to do a special session on the future of digital ordering, driving revenue and enhancing guest engagement. And it is put together today and sponsored by PAR Ordering. And before we get started, let me just go ahead and give you a quick introduction to the IFBTA. So, in meeting the IFBTA is a not-for-profit trade association, obviously focused on food and beverage technology, but our main focus and initiatives are on networking and education. And a lot of people view us that we are the connectors of food and beverage technology in the whole ecosystem. And I think as you're going to hear today in the conversation that we're going to have with PAR, is that in fact, PAR has many different pieces that bring that ecosystem together. And so it makes a lot of sense to have this conversation and take a look at somebody that comes at it from so many different aspects, but also a lot of experience in the industry, and I would say global experience in the industry. And certainly our guest today for this conversation will have that as well. But before we get started, let me just go ahead and give one or two housekeeping pieces. This is being recorded, and you have the opportunity, if you wish, to use the chat function, and you can go ahead and put questions into the chat, and we will take a look at those questions. We will try to answer those questions as we go along if they're part of the subjects that they're. And at the end, we hope to have some time to address some additional questions that you might have in some subjects. If by some chance we don't, we will actually get back to you with those after the session to follow up, because we do want to make sure that any questions that you have, and you will at the end be able to find out how to reach our resources and get additional information on this session as well. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce our speaker, Josh Schoonmaker, who is going to be our guest today with PAR Technology. And it is a conversation in many different ways, and you'll see that. And of course, I'm with the IFBTA. So Josh, welcome to our session today. And why don't we start out with an overview of PAR?
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it, and really appreciate being invited and being able to be here today. So, yeah, let me tell you a little bit about PAR. So, as you mentioned when you were kicking off, PAR is actually extensively involved in this industry. Our mission is really about how we're making sure we get personalized experiences and connect real people to the brands that they love. When you get right down to it, I love our motto here: food, people, nothing in between. We want to make sure that people's connection to the food they love and to the brands that provide that for them is as seamless, as easy as possible. When you think about what PAR is as a company, if we jump to this next slide, we actually offer solutions across the board. So we're an open platform that really brings together solutions in many different areas of restaurant and beverage technology, and make sure that they work together. All of them can be used independently, and they can be used along with anybody else's ecosystem, but we have solutions that work together around ordering, around loyalty, our punch product, around POS, being able to do your payments, whether it's your drive-through or being able to look at your back office data. We actually have solutions in all of those different areas, and that's what makes up PAR. We are a company really focused in on how do we help restaurants, those brands, connect with their customers.
And I would point out that before we leave this particular slide, that there's a lot more to it, and I'm sure that some of our people that are joining us today don't know about all those different products. But if you were to layer on top of this some other pieces, you would see the word global on here, and you would also see the word, you would see multi-industries. I know we're here to talk about the restaurant industry today, but many of these platforms play in different industries
Absolutely.
as well. And you probably hear the word hardware as well as software in there. So there are many different solutions, and it seems like every month you guys are coming out with new announcements of new ways that you're coming at the industry and offering new solutions, both to industry vertical specific, but also across the board in a total portfolio. So I just wanted to add that in here.
I appreciate it. Doing the humble brag here, but yeah, we do cover across all of those areas, and of course in the restaurant areas, but also in hospitality and retail, and yes, from hardware and software. We're really trying to create that full ecosystem for our customers.
Great.
Now let's zoom in for a minute because today we're going to be talking about online ordering or digital ordering. So just want to highlight really quickly the product that we have in this area. We do have our own online ordering system. This allows restaurants to set up and do ordering through their app or through a website, as well as being able to facilitate orders through third-party marketplaces like your DoorDash or your Uber Eats. But we give you the ability with this product to create your own branded digital ordering that's really honed in for the restaurant experience and being able to do that ordering experience. We've got upsell and cross-sell. It integrates with your menu. As I mentioned, it plays nice across the third-party marketplaces and being able to coordinate orders throughout there. So I won't bring up our product a whole lot during the session today. We really want to make sure all of you who've come here in attendance get information about the market and trends and how customers respond. But I couldn't leave without making sure you at least knew some more about the PAR ordering system.
Well, I think it's important that people have that perspective behind it as to where you're coming from. But just like the meetings that you participate in, the other IFBTA things that you participate in, it's really about that conversation around the table and the fact that you have different areas of expertise, that you can bring to the table. It's important that people understand what's behind, your thinking and what gives you the information that's there. And I know you personally have a lot of experience in this as well. So
yeah,
explaining the PAR ordering piece and the different aspects of it, I think is very important background.
absolutely. And having part ordering, like one of the things I say is every single one of our products is better because it's part of an ecosystem with the others. We learn from each other. So even if we're engaging with somebody else's system, we are always better for having an internal team that are experts in each of these areas.
Absolutely. Well, look, we have a lot of subjects to talk about today, and I'm sure that who knows where this conversation is actually going to take us. But
making me nervous there, Rob.
Well, you never know. I mean, I'm still focused on the food and people and nothing in between. Because I'm actually picturing a sandwich, and I'm thinking about like what's in between that brings together that meal, and really satisfies somebody's hunger that's there. So I'm working on that one still.
Some audience member is now going to get a Gen AI created image of like people sandwich before this session's over. You just watch.
People sandwich. All right. Well, okay. So what is on our menu today? So, and I think that that's very apropos for this conversation. So we're going to be speaking about different subjects, marketing headwinds, because there is a lot of marketing out there, and we'll have to focus on that word headwinds that are out there. The consumer and the customer and the guest expectations. We're going to be talking about what do you do with all this data and how do you use the data for meaningful insights, because as we all know, data is king today, and I'd almost say that data is at the center of the universe within the restaurant ecosystem today. And then you got to balance your customer experience with operational efficiency, because the customers are an important part of it. And as we're learning, our customers are actually connected into our ecosystem and the system. So therefore, we actually really have to think about that balance, where in the past, you had the customer here, you had the front of the house, the back of the house. It didn't necessarily, they weren't necessarily a connected and plugged in piece of the ecosystem. So I think that's important. But why don't we go ahead and start really on the first subject today, which is about marketing headwinds. And I'd like to set the stage on this. Could you share your viewpoint, from talking to PAR customers, because you talk to an awful lot of customers, about the state of the industry and what's top of mind regarding the marketing, trade winds or headwinds that are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I decided to bring a little bit of data with me, knowing our topic today. But when we think about the difficulties with marketing around restaurants today, there's a couple things that really stand out. And the first is this increasing cost of customer acquisition. So if you think about CAC, customer acquisition cost, this is something that people are paying a higher and higher price for as we go throughout the years. And this is really relevant because it's not just a one and done, yeah, we have to pay that price. It actually ends up really relating to how much are you investing in retention versus how much are you investing in acquisition. And as the cost of acquisition is going up, that's putting a lot of pressure on how are you getting acquisition, but it's also changing investments towards more of that retention. If we look at some of the data here, this is a projection of where digital ad spending is headed in the coming years, and look at that very nice, healthy step up every single year in digital ad spending. As digital ad spending goes out, remember that in the digital world, most advertising has some element of competition to it, whether that's directly through bidding for the space or whether that's through being able to raise prices as the natural demand rises. But that means the more ad spending is going in there, the more we are actually seeing the cost per ad drive up. And so people are over the years paying more to get that customer acquisition really in there. I think the next slide.
I would guess that while the cost per ad may be going up, at the same time, your reach and leverage for what you're spending on it actually may go further.
Yeah, so there's some interesting counterpoints in that, because we actually see some parts of digital advertising really taking off. But if we jump to the next slide, there's another element that's really affecting this, which comes into relation to social media advertising. So here's a look at Facebook specific ads over the last 3 years. So from 2022 to the 2025 projected, 37% increase in paying for your Facebook ads in 3 years' time. That's a huge jump forward. And to your point, Rob, while some digital marketing really is having that better reach, Facebook is actually experiencing a time where their ads are reaching less people and having less click-through or impact as it goes out, because we are actually seeing a pushback to social media, which leads me into the next slide. If we jump over to this talks a little bit about the fact that there was a really strong projection that social media advertising and engaging with social media was going to be the game changer, especially as the pandemic came in. Go back to 2020, 23% of all global marketing spend was on social media advertising. And at the time, we were telling people, and it's only going to go up. Like, you've got to be in multiple channels. You've got to be actively engaged with this. You need to make sure that your ads aren't completely self-serving, but they're touching on your brand values or on the topics people want. There was just a ton that was going on. And we really saw social media as this primary channel to the customers. But look at how that spend has changed over the past years. Going down in 2023, we see that at just 17%. In 2024, the numbers have come in 11%. That is the lowest level in 7 years. That means you have to rewind the clock to 2018, back before some of our current social media channels even existed, to get back to the lower spending levels that we're seeing now today. And this is reflective of the fact that as social media has gotten more cluttered, as they've allowed a higher concentration of ads, as those ads have become less relevant, as people have gotten more disenchanted with many of the social media channels that are out there, with a lot of the controversy that's come in, it's become less meaningful as this primary channel out to our customers.
I guess also, though, when you're talking about a cluttered landscape and you're talking about overwhelmed by content, that people start to choose the communities that they focus on. It's really by community, and so you really need to know your customer now to get at that community to figure out where you're going to spend it, right?
That's right. It's less mass spending. It's not that there isn't value in social media spending or digital spending. It's about how you're targeting that well. And then also, to your point, Rob, that it's about finding those communities. It's also, how do you connect to those communities through alternate methods? We're seeing hyper local advertising. People are now selling space on high school football scoreboards to be able to get the more local touch. We see influencer marketing coming in to start fill this space, where instead of saying, I'm going to pay my money to the platform, I'll pay my money to certain content creators who are very related to my brand or the concerns that my customers have. So all of this adds up to, when we talk about headwinds in marketing, we're living at a time, this is as far from Mad Men as you can get, where it was like, if you want to do something, you go to the ad people, you spend money, and you get results. Like, we have such a fractured landscape. We have such a confusing space for people to say, how am I going to talk to my customers and get their attention, right? If your answer to that is, oh, just send an email. Anybody seen email filters lately, right? If your answer is just, oh, social media marketing, have you looked at the fact that it's less than half of what it was just 3-4 years ago? And so it creates this environment where, as we talk to restaurants, this is a space that they need a lot of help. And
it's not just restaurants, though. It's also associations like the IFBTA, and then the larger associations like the National Restaurant Association, or, they all have, segments that they need to appeal to, and we all face the same thing.
And when we're thinking, that's exactly right. And when you're thinking about that, if we go to the next slide, this opens up the open question. I already teased this out, but there are a number of things that if you go out there right now and Google, somebody out there is saying, oh, it's okay because influencer marketing is the next thing of where it's going to go.
And by the way,
somebody
Google
else,
is very focused on that, yet you used Facebook up there, but Google certainly is very connected
absolutely.
with the restaurant community
Yeah, yeah. And their use of YouTube is actually really interesting.
for
Short form
training and
video.
education and as well as ad.
Yep.
You're right.
Yep. And I don't know if any of you caught in the news this week, Disney has actually identified they're no longer going to be doing long form content for Disney Plus. They're shifting to short form, meaning instead of creating full episodes, they're now doing like micro episodes like what you would put on YouTube because we're seeing such a shift there. But that relates to the next box there.
That probably
Video
has something
streaming,
to do with
digital
people's
TV.
attention span too.
It does, and preferences that are out in the market. But it also relates to this marketing problem where being able to have short form videos, you're able to deliver the entire video before you have to intersperse ads. And there's a satisfaction that consumers are responding to of being able to not have as many interrupts, but have the interrupts between videos.
You know, I'm thinking about this, and I'm not stuck anymore on the sandwich in between anymore. But you know, as I think about this, you know, there's a challenge in here, or there's an opportunity here for the hospitality industry in general, because there are so many changes going on in the restaurant industry today of where we need to figure out what we're going to do with people's time when they're visiting with us. And that creates the opportunity for PAR inside the store. And it, you know, QSR is different, drive-through time is different, you know, ordering time and delivery is different. But all of these are challenges here. And then when you start thinking about some of the incremental opportunities we have through loyalty and marketing, when you figure where our industry shows up, like convenience stores where you have restaurants today, how are they going to spend their time when they're charging their vehicle? You know, so actually this marketing challenge and how to get to the customer and get their attention is one that's going to just continue to grow.
Absolutely, and I think you just started unpacking some really interesting stuff. We all hear the word gamification coming in for engaging with our customers, and that plays into two major concepts that are relevant here. One of which you just brought up, which is how do we capture the time that when we've got explicit time with the customer while they're waiting for their food or when they're pumping their gas. When we know we have that captive audience, how do we use that? And gamification comes in. The other one is we know from years and years of building board games and video games, a lot of the psychology behind why people love them or why they keep engaging with them and bringing some of that psychology into how we treat our customer engagement really plays out here.
It's a science.
So yeah.
It's a science and it's an art, right? It's an art in knowing your customer, but it's a science in how you engage.
Because everybody who thinks that it's just, oh, give me spin the wheel or a scratch off, a virtual scratch off, and we're done, has missed that what you're actually trying to do is engage with these internal principles, things that your customers care about or want or feel good about, and are trying to use that in association with your brand. So yeah, this whole space, really, really interesting as we look at marketing. And my final advice as we talk about how you're dealing with the marketing headwinds is, one, be aware. I worry a lot about restaurants who don't realize the shift that's happened and are saying, great, next year we'll spend double on social media. Really investigate and make sure that what you're doing there is targeted and does have the kind of ROI.
People want to serve food, and you know, if you're really working with all size of operations, including, you know, those growth companies, the startups, the independents, and then you're working your way through the small to medium businesses, the multi-units, the internet. Boy, you know, how many different complexities are on this menu that, you know, really play to all the different boxes that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, and that was my second point is explore what you're investing in and challenge your assumptions. And secondly, be aware of how many options there are coming out there. This might be a great time to experiment a little. This might be a great time to revisit whether you've got some new opportunities out there and look at the different ways that we can.
And the nice thing about that is that the cost of experimentation is not as much as it used to be before. On the other hand, the cost of experimentation, if you do something wrong, well, there's a cost
is big because right? You've got a limited audience. Yeah,
well,
and small plug for PAR, but because of things like that, you know, PAR, our loyalty platform and marketing platform, is actually launching embedded experimentation, being able to run A/B tests on a campaign. which one of these campaigns performs better, because we see this need in the market happening right
It's
now.
deja vu. It's like putting a POS system into the training mode and still being able to have full access to the database, right?
Yep, and seeing how that responds, how people behave, what you can do with that. So yeah, that ability to test or experiment ends up playing.
But you got to test it in marketing. Why would it be different here? And you have to be able to test it pretty much, on demand, because, any number of things can change your audience just overnight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see people breaking that up by trying stuff with certain geographies or trying something with different customer segments, and dividing it out. So all of those are good moves to try and get better traction. And that, I was going to say that leads to one of our later topics, which is underneath all of this for how to do this well is that center of data.
You're confusing us, but you're going to bring it all together. You're making it complex. You're not confusing us. You're showing us how complex this is.
I'm showing you that, the world right now.
Right?
It's a difficult space that we navigate in. There's lots of good reasons to believe we're going to do that well. Certainly on the PAR side, we invest a lot in loyalty programs and how do you engage known customers in repeat business. That's a great way of doing it. But as you see on the board here, independent of whatever tech solution you use, all of these different channels or methods are things that are up and coming for ways to engage our audiences.
Well, that takes us, so you've got to divide this thing up, right? Because at the end of the day, we have the consumer or the guest. And, they're the ones who make the demands. They want stuff when they want it, where they want it, how they want it, and they're also the ones bringing new technology demands and data demands to us because they're driving, what it is, the content, what they look at and how they get their information and how they order from us, right? So they're doing that as well. So if we think about the consumer expectations, how do you envision, digital ordering, evolving to keep up with significant trends and changes in consumer expectations, and ones that they drive and ones that they're exposed to that drive them?
And I really appreciate that you bring that up because it is both. And when we want to talk about both, but the first place I want to start is when we think about meeting these customers where they're at, a lot of it is being driven by these anchor point companies that are defining a bunch of expectations out there. Love it or hate it, agree with it or not, whether you think this is fair or not. The reality is our customers, our guests, our consumers have been highly influenced by their experience or expectations of what they can do in an Amazon app or website and what they can do on a DoorDash app or website. And they are bringing those expectations as the threshold, as the table
and
stakes.
What they experience in other industries, because we're not the only thing. They're out there shopping, right. they're doing the Amazon and in retail that's out there. They're out there traveling, so they're also bringing those experiences that they see to the table for us.
Absolutely. And that means, like you said, I loved how you divided it out, what the consumer is bringing intrinsically and what they are from an externality point, what was being pushed around to them. And these anchor points, and of course there's others, like you think about, Walmart and Target have real influence in the battle with the airlines, but all of this is driving expectations of how fast an app should respond, or what features are embedded in it, or what layout is chosen, or like all of those things. So even if you want to be differentiated, you cannot ignore that most of your customers' base level expectations are driven by an Amazon or DoorDash type experience.
That means that you need to stay on top of that as well. PAR needs to, and Josh needs to, stay on top of those trends and things, because you've got to look at those and start thinking ahead, because we don't necessarily have that vision in the industry of what is the impact of that going to be, on our future impact, or where's that going to go?
Yeah, and honestly, I would make a call out here. This is part of why it's so important to choose a tech vendor who is a partner, who you have access to talk to, has a good CSM program, who has internal strategists. Because like you were just saying, Rob, it is the tech vendor's job to bring that technology, to understand the shifts in the market, to understand the expectations and bring the tech there. But it also means you want your vendor to be the one that you're going to for advice or guidance as things are changing. So look for those people who will help.
I would tell you that, there are a lot of people out there, and everybody talks about partnership, right? But also experience matters here, and your experience and what it is in the world that you're dealing with. And so it's not just the relationship that you have as a partnership, but also what each party brings to the table. And in your case, you're bringing to the table retail, you're bringing to the table different applications like loyalty and ordering and POS and all the different things that you guys are bringing, those experiences as well come together and you bring international. I mean, so you're bringing to the table more than just the partnership relationship.
Yeah, yeah, you're bringing a depth of expertise, and making that available to them so
And
that our
even if
customers
you
can
don't
learn from it.
personally have it, I bet you know where in the organization to point people to who do have it.
That's exactly right. Like as I happen, like I contribute to this depth, but specifically around technology. My background came from fighting Amazon in some other areas of my previous career. And then you pair me up to some of the people who came up specifically through restaurants who have that retail background, and we build a cadre of people who
You
have
must
this
have a lot of
perspective.
great conversations that go on, when you guys get together for meetings or virtually. I mean, I can only imagine that with all those people coming together, that there's a lot of different opinions, but you share, and then somehow you end up in a shared result.
We have a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of perspectives, but we do bring that together. And honestly, that's part of the joy of working in a job like this, is being able to say, how do we pull all the things we know together to actually solve things that customers know they need solved and sometimes even don't know they need solved before they have it. Well, I want to pull us back into customer expectations, make sure we're still on that, because you created two great buckets. One, this what is being pushed upon them, and I think we talked about that here. My next slide actually goes to the other point you made about more intrinsic, like what are they bringing to the table? And as we think about what they're bringing to the table, I want to frame that around the generational shift that's happening.
There's more than
Because
4 generations, though. There's about 6 in the marketplace now. Because even the youngest generation, under 12 years old, is on their tablets and they are seeing and they're deciding what they
yeah,
want to do, and they engage with us when they're in a restaurant.
yeah, I think cross-generational across all the generations is very, very relevant. The data that this one brings up is specifically about shifts in buying power. And so the takeaway here that I want you to see is one, for baby boomers, for years and years, baby boomers have had a very commanding presence in buying power and decision power. They still have very strong presence, but that has been declining over time. Interestingly, I'm sorry, Gen X, this happens all the time, but you kind of sit right there in the middle and it's staying stable. Not much is happening. Whereas the millennial generation has tripled their buying power in the last decade. So they have come up from very small. And this had implications because many of the millennial generation came into the workforce during the 08-09 recession. And so they had a stunted front end of their career. They have now taken off. And so in the last 10 years, we've seen them explode forward with home buying and wealth and disposable
So
income,
when you're
which
looking
is,
at spending power, though, are we looking at the overall spending power, or are you also slicing and dicing the cost of the transactions? Because obviously, the more money you have, you might spend on larger things or on
on
different
things that
types
have
of
better
things within
margin.
the industry, right? Is part of your experience. On the other hand, maybe you're saving. So, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know.
Now, and I don't happen to have that one here. This is very much the data that relates
I'd like
just
to
to
know their
overall
check average.
spending power. But yeah, I was going to say that AOV, that check
There
average
you go.
of what they're spending, I think is very relevant. And we do see, like, if history follows itself, the later generations almost always have developed tastes or preferences that lead them to overarchingly that higher value. But I think that the most important takeaway that we need to address here is the base expectations of millennials and Gen Z are anchored in digital native thinking. And as we watch millennials triple their buying power, and interestingly, Gen Z is rising so fast now, they may rise faster than millennials did. And so this is a shifting landscape where we're seeing this happen. And that part of this buying power graph has very strong expectations about having an app, about what a login should look like, about what things are available online or digitally
Well,
versus
look at the speed they
physically.
use the applications themselves. I know that's not
Yeah,
necessarily what you meant, but they're brought up natively, they're adopted,
that's
and
right.
that's what it
They
is.
learn it so early that it's just baked into their expectations, their beliefs. And I say I'm part of this generation. I'm part of the people who are coming in here expecting the world to change to my digital desires. But yeah, as that becomes not just we've known for many years that millennials as a very large generation were coming in with this. But it's not until their buying power suddenly just exploded that now this is putting real pressure on the restaurants and places. So as I shift this from the problem statement to the advice statement, like when you think about those, again, I love what you did there, Rob, by saying what do the customers bring to the table and what's put upon the customers that become expectations.
The
I think that's a great way
influencers
of
to the
doing
influencers.
it. Brilliant. You better trademark that one quick. But as we think about those two areas, keep in mind, one, that the expectations that are being pushed on your customers are coming from places that are completely available to you. You may hate it, but go check out Amazon's app and DoorDash's app, and you will learn a lot about what these expectations are. And then the second thing is make sure that you are thinking about how generational shift is happening with your audience, and not just what does your audience look like today, but which one of your generations is growing faster. Are you staying really steady with baby boomers and not growing with millennials? Are you okay with that? Are you actually seeing a faster growth with Gen Z, but you're not resonating with Gen X and millennials? Are you okay with that? I think this helps you understand what level of investment to do in digital experience.
I
Or
find
what
that
pieces of
interesting,
it.
though, that you point out that the thing to do is take a look at what these companies are doing, right? And how they're interacting, the user experience. How are they interacting? Now, we tell, restaurant operators, if you don't have all the money in the world, go take a look at some of the market leaders and see where they're picking their sites, what kinds of technology stack or reporting they have, how many applications, how are they doing it? Because you can learn from that, even though that is not necessarily the way you may need to do it. You can learn from that. And I think as we point out to this, and I know we're about to get to, what do we do with all this data, right? And the insights on it. But if you think about that, if I go into a restaurant and I want to know what they're doing in the restaurant, I go just say, do me a favor, pull up the screen on your PC or show me your handheld and let me take a look at it. And all I need to do is see that screen and I know what they have access to and what they're doing. And it's the
Yeah.
same sort of thing here.
Absolutely, absolutely, and one of the things I like, you just introduced that concept that we in the tech world often call the fast follow strategy. So you've got the innovators who are actually figuring out the first move, and then you've got a wave of people who are just very good at moving quickly, so that when somebody else figures out the right move, they can follow that quickly. It's not a bad place to be, but I specifically like talking to restaurants for a minute in here. Like as you think about the fact that Amazon and DoorDash are not technically a restaurant, you have a fast follow move that may actually jump you ahead of your other direct
But they
competitors.
are showing you how people are interacting and how they're
That's
buying.
right.
The
Exactly.
process.
Because they
They
are
are
figuring
showing the
out the
process.
answer for what that UX or what that new capability needs to be. And so if you can fast follow there, you very well may be ahead of many of the other people in your industry.
And even though everybody doesn't use every function that's available to them, I like looking at the list of functions. If you hit the little bars up there and you pull it down, I go to the personalization and I look at every which way I can personalize something just to understand why they're offering it. And they're offering it because somebody asked them. And there's somebody out there who wants it, right?
And I think you must be the brilliant host that you are, because you just gave us the perfect segue into shifting into talking about data because it relates so much to personalization and
Yeah,
how we're
well,
able to
this is a
achieve that.
huge subject, on the menu today. It's probably at the center of the plate, quite frankly, and everything else is, the pieces that you're putting on the plate and the side orders and the dessert, right, is the outcome of it. But if we think about that and we're talking about utilizing the data to get meaningful results, there's just so much data available today, not just directly, but indirectly through all the things that people are connected to that are out there. And, it's available not only to the marketing side of this, but the operators and the customers. And so a vendor like, PAR, has to house a lot of data, out there. So what do you think the vendor's responsibility is in helping to make sure that the data is useful, both to the operators as well as the marketing side? And I do recognize those are two different sides, right? One's driving them in and the other's got to serve them and get them to come back.
Deliver
So,
for them.
what's the responsibility? What do you do with all this?
Yeah, no, I think this is such a key question as you've been bringing up. And I think you used a word there that I really want to emphasize for everybody on the call, which is how do you make that useful? And you'll also see in the title of this, utilizing data for meaningful insights. And I think that's, it sounds so basic or so obviously, of course you want useful, but that's actually the reality of where we need to be focused with data right now.
Actionable insights.
That's right. Because
Meaningful
we're
and
going to,
actionable.
that's right. We're going to start with the basic concept of data aggregation. How do you get your data? And honestly, early in my career, this was a major problem. Have you actually gone digital instead of paper? Are you actually collecting that information? But at this point, that's not the problem. Data aggregation, how do you bring all the different types of data you've collected and bring it together, starts being the question. And it is really important. But I actually want to bring up the next piece and talk about these in conjunction, which is data normalization and how that feeds AI or insightful analytics. Because I think, as you mentioned, we really need to think about this as making it useful, not just how do we collect data. Because right now, if you jump into our business world, it's not a lack of data. It is making that data meaningful together, aggregating it, making it useful, or finding the insights that are buried in that data that's
And
actually
then
the
let
problem
me
to
just
fix.
add to that one, because I'm going to guess that most people, I mean, you would understand this, but most people don't actually understand all the data that you actually have. I mean, they just do not, understand all the data touch points and things that they're coming in connection to where data is
Yeah.
being passed. And so it's not just the challenge of what to do with the data that you have and making it meaningful and useful and on demand so that you don't have to think about it, but it's also knowing what you have, because if you don't know what you have, you don't know what you can do with it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you follow kind of the we're going to lay out four things here. That first one of data aggregation includes, like, if you unpack that, that includes kind of a self-assessment and introspection of your organization and your data points, because the what you're collecting from your website, like, there may be much more richness there than you realize, and you're getting a bunch of data from in store. People are always like, "Oh, I get such rich data online," but in store, you would be surprised on how much you can actually pull out of your in store experience, and then marry that together with what you have from online. But it only happens intentionally. Right now, we don't yet have a world where data is so known, where this is so, rote, that this just happens because systems have always been built that way. Maybe someday we'll be there, but right now this takes a level of conscientiousness in aggregation. And then that next step, normalization. Whenever somebody tells you how excited they are about AI, the first thing you need to think before, yeah, I want that, is, have I taken my data and normalized it in such a way that my data looks the same from all the different places, that it is easily consumable? Because that's what ends up powering all of this AI. And I do want to call out, like, AI was a hype. It is also real. We do need to pay attention to the fact that there is a lot of value to be captured there, but we need to be pragmatic about how we approach that, and actually try and get into that. And that leads us into, we've got this next one, trends and repeat business. Like, as you start thinking about getting your data, normalizing it, and being able to plug it into AI, you then want to say, now, how do I actually amplify or build on this, by looking at this over time? Because often it's not just about, oh, look, that sandwich is the most popular. It's about, oh, look, if you look over 6 months, that sandwich gets popular here.
You
It
know,
goes
you
down in
know,
popularity.
when I think about that, I don't tend to focus so much on the AI. I assume that it's embedded, but what is its use, right? And so a good example of that is, that you're not the first person to ask that question. Nobody ever is, right? How do I know that? Because I go do a Google search and I'm just watching something on TV and I get to 2 words in and there's the whole question, right? So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
tells me that others are looking at that. And I said, if we make this real in the restaurant environment with all the data and the insights that PAR is able to provide through all the data collection points that you have, where it's doing, it's speeding up the process and starting to think about what it is you're actually trying to do. You may not actually know it. You may be new to the industry. You may be new to this type of restaurant, but you have all the experience and the data from all those different areas that are there. And so it's anticipating, maybe it's anticipation of information as well in AI that is helping you to take that data and put it quickly in a format that you can use.
That's right. That's right. And I think this all gets back to, both Rob and I are saying the same thing to all of you in the audience, which is, bring this pragmatic, practical, outcomes oriented approach. It is so easy to get excited about LLMs. It is so easy to get excited about what you just saw in a YouTube video about what AI can do today and tomorrow. And I'm not dissing any of that. I come from the tech world. I am probably part of the reason you have those kind of hype cycles.
Okay.
But bring this pragmatic approach, bring this outcomes orientation to it, and you get so much more out of it. No one on this call is on the bleeding edge of AI technology research. What we are consumers of something that is being productized.
I tell
And
people all the time, everybody eats, but everybody is also a consumer of the data and the technologies that we're using, whether they know it or not, no
yeah, I
matter which
guarantee you
generation you
consume
are,
more
right?
data than food in a day at this point. But so coming back to our setup here, so you want to then look at over time. How are you looking at trends? And what I will also say here, because we're talking AI, if you're looking for practical AI, sometimes not leaning into the latest generation, a lot of the LLMs that are more generative, but actually leveraging stuff that's been played out well. Like there is fantastic AI for anomaly detection, for clustering analysis, and for trends analysis,
So I
essentially.
see this last bullet that's here. I'm getting two things
Yeah.
from it. One is the trend of knowing what you need to do to serve your customer and also anticipate demand, give better efficiency, better service that's out there. But, the word repeat business is here, and that implies to me like loyalty or something else.
Which, yeah, thank you. That guiding us
Oh,
into
there
it,
you
I
go.
think
All
one of the
right.
key things is no, you're absolutely right. Because if you're thinking about repeat business, not only are you thinking from marketing, you have to start thinking about how you're driving intentional retention. So, and that goes to loyalty.
Yeah, by
Um,
the way, let me just point out something because our industry is driven by a number of metrics that are out there. One obviously is check average, but also it used to be in the old days, you'd say, how can I get somebody to come one more time a month or something like that, right? How do I get, more frequency in there?
yeah.
Well, loyalty is more than that because we have so many more new outlets of where we sell food today. Whether it's trucks, whether it's delivery, whether it's pickup lockers, whether it's the drive-through, or whether it's micro markets, there are so many more outlets that loyalty becomes even more complex because you want to not only create what you're bringing in your four walls, but now you're delivering to them, but also they
Mhm.
may be picking up or experiencing you in some
And
non-traditional
some other
places.
third party. Yep, absolutely. And like this is both the challenge and the opportunity. That challenge is you are now trying to manage your relationship or your brand across experiences that you don't fully control, which is very problematic, very difficult to do.
Absolutely.
But also, if you can use loyalty programs or loyalty engagement to incentivize people to identify themselves when they show up in all of these other channels, you can actually have a pathway to create that better experience because the customer is essentially opting in, saying it is worth my effort to identify myself, even though I'm picking this up from a different location or ordering from a third party marketplace. And that allows you to really open a much richer
Yeah, by the
conversation
way,
with your
the good
customer.
news is that all those other influencers of our consumers have trained them on giving away certain information to get something. So we no longer have to ask that on our own.
And this goes back to the previous with a generational transition, like getting a baby boomer to give up their information as a group. I know there's always individuals, but as a group is much harder than getting a Gen Z person to
Right.
give up their information. And that's because they have different values. They see things differently. They see the value of that differently. They see the threat of that differently. And so as you recognize what your business is really targeting, know that that's another piece of that generational shift. Well, I think,
That brings
yeah, that moves us over.
It does. And so, we said at the beginning that you got to bring this all together because at the end of the day, you have to balance, the experience. And it is about experiences, right? So you have to balance the customer experience no matter where they're connecting with you and no matter where that experience, it doesn't always happen in your four walls, right? And some of
Mhm.
it's out of your control, of how they get delivered that experience. So how do you balance that customer experience with operational, efficiency? And if we think about that, we've talked an awful lot, about the guest experience, and how do brands balance? Because we can learn from the brands. How do the brands balance creating a seamless experience, but then meshing that up with the right balance of operational efficiency, in
Yeah.
providing what they provide to the guest.
Yeah, and anybody in this industry is going to start by telling you, well, customer experience isn't different than operational efficiency. They're totally tied in. You're absolutely right. You are. Also, this is a game of optimization points where an investment in operational efficiency does not inherently mean better customer experience, and an investment in customer experience does not inherently mean an improvement in operational efficiency, even though they are entangled. And so you need to think about this very intentionally and very carefully about where you're putting investments. My first advice around this is start with customer experiences that are highly driven by operational efficiency, because then by driving the operational efficiency, you get that direct correlation. You are inherently driving customer experience. And that way, at least some territories of your business, these aren't as in competition with each other for investment. Things like, it may not seem obvious, but menu syncing. Having your menu be the same in all the different places that you have creates operational efficiency, because you're not having to try and settle out different tickets that look different, or do end of the day balancing, or deal with conflicts on them. But it also creates a better customer experience, because if a customer's been ordering from a menu that they saw on maybe DoorDash for weeks,
That
and
is a
says,
huge
actually,
challenge,
now I
training
want
the
to show
customer,
up.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So this menu syncing concept, very difficult to solve. But if you do, this has high impact on both of those simultaneously. Same kind of thing. This is such an under the radar thing, but managing your locations and your hours, something you've got to manage that inside of Google Maps. You've got to manage that inside of DoorDash. You've got to manage that for your first party applications. You've got to manage that for your operational systems. You've got to manage that inside of your POS system. By bringing that together and actually finding a more unified way of doing that, you create operational efficiency, but it also means the customer's experience gets better inherently.
People want to have, the word frictionless and seamless customer experiences. And by the way, they want that for the employees as well. There's always this age-old consideration of, do you go best of breed or do you do all in one? And clearly from your very first slide where you're talking about, you have both best of breed and all in one, but that also is, bringing it to the table that one of the considerations you need to throw on the table right now is how are you going to do seamless things and syncing like that to create experience. And as soon as you start fragmenting that, while the APIs may take care of some of that in the integration, you certainly have tons of those, there is something to be said for keeping it within the ecosystem.
Yeah, there is an ability to do that more easily, more efficiently, more out of the box with less work for the restaurants by doing it in ecosystem. Of course, we make it possible to do that with anybody as a partner because, as you said, of APIs and data, open data exchange. But there is value in creating a unified ecosystem, bring this in. A couple others just to think about as we're on this, as we're winding down, but order throttling is another one where if you get this right, you are making your lanes work better, you are making your employees optimized out, and you are definitely increasing customer experience because their expectations are set correctly instead of getting frustrated by stuff. Order editing, this is one a lot of people ignore. It's very difficult from some payment and settlements perspectives, but being able to come back into an order and change things actually can really amplify a customer experience. And you say, but what about operational efficiency? Isn't that actually problematic for us? Because we got the order, we thought we knew exactly what we had. Well, let's look at it this way. The customer's other options are cancel the order and replace the order by making the change on an entirely new one, or to show up at your location and say, I know I ordered that, but what I actually meant was. And so this is another one where it may not be as obvious, but
Amazon
it
can
hits
learn
both.
from you on this one. I'm constantly canceling an order and having to replace it
And
because
having to
it was
replace
something
it
that
with
I
the
didn't see,
changes.
right?
I'll also give you a quick best practice for all of you listening who are like, this is insanely difficult once we've closed a ticket. Here's the first entry point. If you want to play in this area, allow a customer to add something to an order. And behind the scenes, you can make that 2 orders. But they forgot to buy the milkshake that went with their thing, and they just placed the order. Don't make them cancel that order, even if you can't reopen a ticket.
You're talking about a reverse split check. Instead of splitting
Exactly.
the check, you're actually taking 2 checks and putting them together.
That's right. That's right. And it is a much more tractable way to start into this than saying, I'm going to let you open up that order and change whether there's lettuce on the burger or not. So anyway, there are ways of stepping into this that are worthwhile. Last one really quickly, real-time order status updates. This goes back to that expectation. If any of you have ever used Amazon or DoorDash, you know that you're looking at a dang icon of a car driving to show you where your package is and where your updates. So at the point that we're not even giving people updates, I have a favorite pizza place, and they have this amazing thing in their app where they're tracking the pizza right up until it leaves the store. And then they stop tracking it and say, and it'll be there sometime in the next 30 minutes, maybe. And even though they did such a great job with so much of that because of the market expectations, because I am one of those millennials that has these beliefs, that miss of the last mile of tracking makes me feel like I didn't even get the value out of the tracking that they invested so much in. So make sure, if it doesn't have to be a car, but you do need to give updated real-time statuses to customers. They should know if there's a delay. They should know if it's getting there early. There is an expectation around that. And
it
that'll help
connects,
your
and by the way,
operations and them.
if you think about it, it actually improves engagement. If I think about it, you can always use analogies from other industries, right? So I travel all the time. And if you knew how many times I keep going back to my app to take a look at the flight, did my seat change? Is there open? Can I get on the upgrade list? I must be sitting there standing 30 minutes before, and I bet I've gone on it 15 times. And so it's not just something that makes them happier and they know what the status is and they know what to expect and you're making expectation, but it actually is giving you the opportunities to engage more.
Yeah. And so that eyeball engagement more. And secondly, I really want to go to the the heavy hitting word here, which is that is about relationships of trust versus just relationship. Because a relationship of trust allows bad news to be exchanged because you trust both parties to act reasonably within it. And so I've heard people like, oh, we don't want to show the deliveries because maybe we won't make it. Maybe it won't be on time, or maybe they'll get disappointed. Yeah, you deal with that. But can you imagine an airline saying, we're not going to tell you whether the flight's delayed or not because we don't want to expose that we're often late? No, the people who are actually making the most headway here are the ones that are saying, yeah, we're going to fight against delays, or we're going to give you the right estimates, but we're making sure you have the full data because now you trust us. Now you're going to work with us. Now you know that if it is delayed or if something is changing on it, you're going to be aware so you don't get a surprise on it.
I
So,
think I
yeah.
think that trust is extremely important in the relationship, as it is in all. And it's not just that you're going to give me what I want and you're going to meet that, but also the trust in what you're providing me. And that goes well beyond, by the way, just what you're talking about here. But food safety became a huge trust issue. And so you have
Yes,
to trust who
absolutely.
you're working with.
Yep. And I want to call out that one, 30 seconds on this. But notice the people that made it through food safety with the least problems were the ones who got in front of it and said, "Our bad. Here's what we're doing to solve it. We will give you updates along the way." The ones that tried to bury it by saying, "Oh, no comment, we'll just let this pass," ended up taking much bigger damage. And so again, that relationship of trust, interesting. My last point for everybody as you're on here, and then we'll open up for questions. But when we're thinking about competing needs with customer experiences and operational efficiency, yes, my first answer was both. And invest in one place and get both. Can't always do that. So here's my last piece of advice. When you're dealing with this, remember, customer experience is actually probably the heavier hitting thing here. It is the first place to start. So if you are looking at multiple investments, one for customer experience and one for operational efficiency, and for any reason there's an unknown ROI, you're not sure which one's going to have the biggest impact, choose customer experience. If you can identify that there is a high known ROI for operational efficiency, if we relay out our lanes like this, it's going to have this kind of impact, and we can actually see that. That's a great time to invest in operational efficiency. But where there's unknowns, my advice to you is go ahead and choose the customer experience as your default until you have the data or confidence to say, in this situation, operational efficiency justifies shifting it over here.
Well, listen, we're going to go ahead and take some questions. And I've been getting some questions as we've been talking about this, but I also want to just point out that, and I know it'll come up after this, and we'll just point out where you can get more information. But both the IFBTA and the team from PAR, including Josh, I think, are going to be at Mertech next week, which is great because you can follow up in person. Because I love in person. This works okay.
That's
but
right. You didn't like what I said?
And then
you can let me
then
know
we
it in
find out what's
person.
out there. But let me just cover a couple of questions that have come up here because obviously we have an engaged audience. So you must have said something good. So this is you're hitting on some core challenges, opportunities. So what kinds of strategies are likely to be most effective if people are creating repeat business through digital ordering? What role does loyalty play in that whole piece? Because there's several parts and pieces.
Yeah. And I want to call out, like, I talk a lot about loyalty, and I'm going to unpack that, but I will totally also admit there are many strategies for creating repeat business, and you should engage in multiple, because there are some customers who will just not engage with loyalty programs, but they will engage in repeat business.
And you really
So,
have to be able to engage how the customer wants, which could be generational, it could be by
yep,
geography, or
yep.
custom, there's any number of ways. And I think you have to be prepared to engage and provide that information and service no matter how they want it.
That's right. That's right. So having strategies that acknowledge that loyalty programs, loyalty software is a way to talk to loyal customers, but you may have loyal customers who decide not to be part of a loyalty program or don't engage with it heavily, and that's okay
But
because
the
the
data is
question
still
asked about
out there behind
strategies.
the scenes to engage for them and know who they are and create that loyalty, even though the machine's not doing it. You have that
That's
data.
right. No, that's exactly right. Is if we think about strategies for creating repeat business, of course, we could go on and on and on about what's baked into loyalty programs because it's centered on that. So there's tons there, and if you're only going to do one thing, get a loyalty program and do what it advises you, because that will get you. But also other strategies that are important here, as Rob just mentioned, is actually get into your data. And I'm also going to say something tech people don't say enough, which is take the people who are most experienced in your business, have them read the data, and then also use their gut. But you will be able to find ways of engaging with repeat customers who are not necessarily in the loyalty program, but are loyal customers by looking at that data and then bringing your most experienced people in and saying, what is it that drives them, or how are we
Go
getting them
ahead and
back
get
in the
the
door?
person who gets the most comment cards, or people who have really called them out
Yeah,
for
yeah.
different types of service. It's not just, our traditional ways of doing that is who has the best check averages, who does this, who does the upselling. But a lot of that data, comes from the customer, and you want to clone your best people and
It's
get
a
that
really
knowledge
interesting
from them,
point,
I
Rob.
think is your point, right?
Yeah, and I will say this as well. Again, something you don't hear enough from tech people right now is our human beings are still the most important asset we have. Yes, I like AI. Yes, I think we need data. Yes, I build software. And also leverage those people who are closest to your customer, who have those great comment cards or who have that good relationship there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's any number of learnings that are there, but use that experience. I think we have time for one more quick question here, but and just in general, because you have so much knowledge, you deal with so many customers, but and this is like more than a 2-minute question, but what trends do you see that are guiding your customers in planning and the strategies? I mean, at the beginning of this, you talked about budgets and spend, but there's got to be some trends. Not everybody has
Yeah, yeah.
unlimited budgets and they don't have time to do the research. So why don't you share that with us?
Yeah, I think I only time to share a couple of things. So if you ever want, you can pull me aside and ask me for my 6 trends that are coming in the market. But the two that I want to call out here are one that we've touched on in this call already, which is if you did nothing else, think about your digital brand presence or your digital experience or meeting digital expectations. The amount of pressure on that alone is probably one of the most influential ways that you could actually make a difference. And it's very accessible. It's something that every brand has some entry point to. The second one is personalization. And this is harder and it does take a different level of maturity and data focus. But if you can get there, the next most important thing to do is how are you doing personalized recommendations? How are you engaging with customers with different messages depending on who they are? How are you giving them a different experience in drive-through if they happen to be loyalty member versus not? Those levels of personalization is the other most important trend that meet good digital experiences and brand and then focusing on personalization.
Well, I really hope that everybody has enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to see this conversation continue. And I'm going to tell you, Josh, since I know that you're going to be at Mertech next week and we'll be there, I think you and I will be having a conversation. If you show up
I
at like
love it.
3 in the morning at the coffee shop, we'll be meeting on that. But we'll continue. But I think that's really what this is about. We've started a conversation today. We want that conversation to continue next week. And you can see both the PAR booth, and you should join the IFBTA Celebration of Technology on Tuesday evening, of which PAR will be at that as well. I do want to just end with one little comment because I heard you say something. Did you say that you had six? What did you have there? 6 points?
6 trends that are coming up in the market. Yeah, I've got a presentation I give to some of my customers directly when they ask like what's going on in the market, help us
Well, let me
understand.
just say the IFBTA here on this webinar may be asking you if you might want to pull that one together. We'd be happy to share that with people as well. I think it'd make a great, gift for attending and listening to this webinar today. So,
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Schoonmaker at Par, and thank you so much for having this conversation. I really want to have that conversation. Let it continue here because you're on to some really great topics and you got great experience. And I don't want people to forget that it's not just the experience of the person and the individual and Josh, it's the experience of the company and everything that they bring. And it's the experience, the extended experience that the company has as they bring on new and interesting applications and they work in other industry verticals, other applications, and certainly the international component as well. So thank you for joining the IFBTA with our conversation guest today, Par. And Josh, I look forward to continuing the conversation, not only with you, but everybody who has attended today and that we'll run into in the next few weeks. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Rob. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day. It was great to be able to share some time with you.
Thank you.